So, is China really a threat to international peace, or is the US just exaggerating? That's a question with a lot of layers, and honestly the answer depends a lot on where you're standing, and who's talking. Let's break this down. First, why do people say China is a threat? Well, over the last couple of decades, China's become an absolute powerhouse. Its economy's huge, its military is modernizing fast, and it's got big ambitions. Like the Belt and Road Initiative, which connects countries across Asia, Africa, and Europe with Chinese investment and influence. Some countries, especially the US and its allies, see all this as a challenge to the current world order. There's also the South China Sea. China claims big chunks of it, but so do other countries like Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia. China's even built artificial islands and put military equipment there. That's made the neighbors and the US pretty nervous. Plus, China's been increasing its military presence around Taiwan, a self-governing island that China says is part of its territory. The US supports Taiwan, but not officially. That's a super sensitive situation with a lot of potential for conflict. Now, let's flip the script. From China's perspective, it's just doing what any rising power does, protecting its interests, developing its economy, and making sure it isn't bullied by outsiders. They argue that the US has military bases all over the world, and it's the US that's been involved in a lot of wars far from home. In fact, China says its growth is peaceful, and that it wants cooperation, not confrontation. But here's the thing, the US has been the world's top dog for decades. Its military, its alliances, its global influence, they set the rules. Now, with China rising, the US sees a rival, and maybe even a threat to its leadership. That's why you hear so much about the China threat in Western headlines. Critics say this might be exaggerated, driven by competition or even fear of losing status. So, is China a real threat to international peace, or is the US just hyping things up to keep its position? Honestly, it's complicated. China's actions do worry a lot of countries, but sometimes fears get blown out of proportion, especially when there's big power rivalry involved. The truth probably sits somewhere in the middle. China's definitely changing the world, and that can be unsettling. But calling it a threat depends on your point of view, and what you think about who should run the show. So, what do you think? Is China a danger, or is this just another chapter in the story of big powers competing for influence? Drop your thoughts below. Let's keep the conversation going. When we talk about China's rise, it's not just about economics or ambition, it's about real on-the-ground tensions with its neighbors. Let's take a closer look at where things have gotten heated. First up, the South China Sea. For decades, this body of water has been a hotspot, but in recent years, China's moves have drawn global attention. Using what's known as the 9-dash line, China claims almost the entire sea, a region that's rich in resources and home to some of the world's busiest shipping lanes. But Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan all have overlapping claims. In the last decade, China has built artificial islands, equipped them with airstrips, radar, and missile systems, and sent Coast Guard and fishing fleets deep into disputed waters. This has led to tense standoffs, with Filipino and Vietnamese vessels facing off against much larger Chinese ships. International courts have ruled against China's claims, but Beijing has rejected these decisions, pushing ahead with its plans. Next, the Himalayan border with India. This boundary, known as the line of actual control, is poorly defined and fiercely contested. In 2020, things turned deadly in the Galwan Valley, where Chinese and Indian troops clashed in brutal hand-to-hand combat, no firearms, but rocks and clubs. At least 20 Indian soldiers and an unknown number of Chinese troops died. Since then, both sides have built up their military presence in the region, with regular skirmishes and tense face-offs becoming almost routine. Finally, there's Taiwan. China considers the island a breakaway province, while Taiwan sees itself as a sovereign state. The tension isn't new, but it's escalated recently. China has sent record numbers of fighter jets and warships near Taiwan, and military drills have ramped up, especially after high-profile visits by foreign politicians. The world watches nervously, knowing that any miscalculation here could trigger a much bigger conflict. Throughout all these disputes, you'll see headlines, maps lighting up with contested borders, footage of military parades, and images of anxious diplomats at tense negotiations. Protests break out in the streets, and ordinary people in these regions often find themselves caught in the middle. These flashpoints aren't just about lines on a map, they're about history, pride, and the realities of power in a changing world. And as China's influence grows, so do the stakes for everyone involved. China's assertive moves aren't just blips on the news, they have real, lasting impacts on its neighbors. Let's break down what's happening on the ground, in boardrooms, and behind closed doors. For countries like Vietnam and the Philippines, China's activities in the South China Sea have forced tough choices. Fishermen lose access to traditional waters, coast guards are stretched thin, governments scramble to upgrade their navies and seek help from outside powers. The Philippines, for example, has rekindled military ties with the United States, reviving joint exercises and reopening strategic bases. Vietnam has deepened its defense partnerships with countries like India and Japan, quietly acquiring new weapons and technology. India, meanwhile, faces a two-front challenge, managing a tense border with China in the Himalayas, and keeping an eye on Chinese influence in the Indian Ocean. The result? More defense spending, new military bases, and a growing sense of urgency to modernize its forces. Politically, anti-China sentiment has surged, with calls to boycott Chinese products and strengthen economic self-reliance. Japan, though not directly involved in the border disputes, watches warily. With Chinese ships regularly entering waters near the Senkaku Islands, Japan has ramped up its own military readiness and strengthened alliances, most notably with the United States and Australia. These tensions have led to a web of new and strengthened alliances. The Quad, a security dialogue between the US, Japan, India, and Australia, has become more active, holding joint naval drills and high-profile summits. ASEAN countries, while divided on some issues, are increasingly vocal about the need for a rules-based order in the region. We see regional leaders shaking hands at summits, but behind those smiles there's a growing sense of unease. Economic graphs show shifts in trade and investment. Some countries pull back from Chinese projects, while others diversify their partnerships. Protests and rallies break out, reflecting public anxiety and rising nationalism. In the end, China's aggressive posture is reshaping the entire region. It's not just about military standoffs, it's about economics, politics, and the daily lives of millions. As alliances tighten and strategies shift, Asia's future hangs in the balance. If you found this video insightful, please subscribe and hit the like button to support the channel.